Dear students, welcome back. Hope you had a good weekend. This week we're going to look at what happens to the eastern half of the Roman Empire. Last week we looked at the collapse of the western half of the Roman Empire after 476 and the transformation of what was once the Western Roman Empire into a very different system we know as feudalism, right? Something very different happens in the West. Now what's interesting is that the eastern half of the Roman Empire will actually continue to exist. It will be known as the Byzantine Empire. It will continue to exist until 1453. So for another 1,000 years, the Eastern Roman Empire lives on after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. And it lives on as a Christian Eastern Roman Empire, which brings me to the first question I want to talk about now, which we didn't last week, which is, why is it that Europe becomes Christian after around 300? And by Europe, I mean what was once the Roman Empire. Why do Romans adopt Christianity after 300 CE? And here, I'm talking about Romans in both halves, East and West. So we'll look at that. And number two, we're going to look at some of the main characteristics of the Byzantine Empire, and also how what happened in the eastern half of the Roman Empire was very different from what happened in the western half, which we examined last week. Okay, so one of the differences, well, in the western half of the Roman Empire, you have the disappearance of the Roman Empire and its replacement by feudalism. That's very different in the East. In the East, you don't have feudalism, and you have the survival of a Roman Empire. All right, so let's move on to our first question here. Why Christianity? Now, first of all, three big reasons. Number one, by around 200, Romans had lost faith in their old gods, and they had begun to adopt new faiths, new religions that came from the East, new Oriental religions. And one of them would prove to be Christianity. Christianity would be the one religion which would be most successful and ultimately spread throughout the Roman Empire. So why Christianity? Well, Christianity is what we know as a salvation religion. A salvation religion is a religion that believes that it can offer to you a savior who will help you, will save you, will bring you hope in this life and in the afterlife. And this brings me to the second reason for the success of Christianity, which is something we discussed last week. By the 3rd century, Roman society, Roman civilization, the Roman Empire was in deep crisis, and people were desperate. People were poor, people were scared, there was civil war, and so you can imagine that Christianity was seen to offer salvation to people was very attractive. Okay, so Christianity was a response to the crisis of the Roman Empire. People turned to Christianity as a way of trying to save themselves from that crisis. Finally, there's a third reason for the success of Christianity, and this is particularly true in this stage, at this early stage, in the Byzantine Empire, in the eastern half of the Roman Empire, which is the adoption by Roman emperors of Christianity, and the adoption of Christianity as the official state religion of the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay, reason number three. I should point out here that earlier, Roman emperors had actually sometimes persecuted Christians because they saw Christianity as a threat. And why had they previously thought Christianity was a threat? Well, because Christians are monotheistic, and the Roman emperors earlier believed in their Roman gods, Jupiter and Minerva. That will change after 300 with Constantine the Great, which we'll talk about. Constantine the Great will be the first Byzantine emperor to first tolerate and then adopt Christianity as his own, and therefore as the religion of the Roman state. So I'm going to briefly now talk about two famous Byzantine emperors. Constantine, which I just mentioned, very much the founder of the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, seen here holding the walls of the city he founded in the Eastern Roman Empire, Constantinople. And then Justinian, who lived 2 centuries later in the 6th century, holding the most famous of the churches of Constantinople, Hagia Sophia. Okay, so first we'll start with Constantine, the founder of the Byzantine state. Now, Constantine's famous for two decisions he made, basically. In 313, in the Edict of Toleration, Constantine decided that Christianity from now on would be tolerated. Okay, not persecuted as it had been earlier, tolerated. And a little later on his deathbed, Constantine actually converted to Christianity. This was very, 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 very consequential for the future, because after Constantine, all emperors, all Roman emperors in the East, aside from one, would be Christian emperors. And that would make Christianity the official religion of the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay, so that's one reason why we call Constantine the Great. The other reason is that he decided to move the capital from Rome to a city he founded and named after himself, Constantinople. He decided to move, notice, the capital from the western half of the Roman Empire to the eastern half of the Roman Empire. Why? Two main reasons. One, Constantine considered that the Eastern Roman Empire could be defended more easily from barbarian invasions. So there was a military reason for shifting the capital to the east. The second reason was economic. The Eastern Roman Empire had always been the richest half of the Roman Empire. So here we have a very practical decision. In the face of crisis, Constantine decided, let's focus on what we have that's will bring us wealth and that we can defend militarily. Consequences. Once again, just like Constantine's adoption of Christianity, the consequences would be enormous. What this meant was that from now on, emperors would focus their resources on defending the Eastern Roman Empire, not the Western Roman Empire. The consequence of that would be that the Roman Empire would collapse in 476, whereas the Eastern Roman Empire would live on another 1,000 years. Okay? Another reason that Constantine is so famous is also has to do with his decision on where to place his capital of Constantinople. He placed in a very strategic place right here, smack at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, of the trade routes that crossed Europe and Asia, and therefore at the crossroads of wealth, right? Wealth creation, trade, commerce is wealth creation. Number two, his decision to build his capital, Constantinople, in this particular location, which is a peninsula surrounded by water, made it very defendable militarily. And that combined with the decision to build these huge walls along the land side made Constantinople very hard to conquer. And that's one of the main reasons the Eastern Roman Empire would survive another 1,000 years. Unlike Rome, Constantinople was not conquered until 1453. Okay, so that's Constantine. Let's move on to the great Justinian, who lived a couple of centuries later. I want to talk about Justinian. He's famous for many different reasons, but in this context, I want to emphasize his building of Hagia Sophia, the great church of Holy Wisdom in Constantinople, a masterpiece of architecture. You have the inside here and the outside here. What we have here illustrated, again, is this very strong connection between Christianity and the Byzantine emperor, a relationship between Christianity and emperor which would be beneficial to both the spread of Christianity, of religion, but it was also beneficial to the emperor to adopt a faith that was so popular. Okay, so very close connection here between Christianity and the Byzantine Empire. And finally, I want to look at briefly a slide which speaks to a question I ask you. I ask you to identify ways in which, Byzantium and, or in other words, the Eastern Roman Empire was different, profoundly different from feudal Western Europe. And the fate of Byzantium was very different from what happened in Western Europe, which became feudal. And I illustrate here one example of that difference is that in the Byzantine Empire, big cities continued to exist for another 1,000 years. They disappeared for 1,000 years in Western Europe, not so in Eastern Europe, in Eastern Roman Empire. This is a reconstruction of what Constantinople looked like in the 13th century. It was the biggest city in the world on a scale you had only really existed in Rome previously. So that's one big difference. And here I have a plate with many other differences between what happens in Western Europe, what happens in Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Empire remains a rich empire. Big cities continue to exist and to flourish, not just Constantinople, others. Commerce and trade continues, and therefore wealth creation. The empire itself, obviously, continues to exist. ruled by a supreme ruler known as the Roman Emperor, and associated to a Christianity which will come to be known as Orthodox Christianity, right? Compare that to Western half of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire disappears after 476. The Roman state disappears. There's a collapse of the economy, shrinking cities, poverty, catastrophe. Ultimately, out of that stress of catastrophe will emerge a new system known as feudalism, which is profoundly different from the system in place in the Byzantine Empire, right? And also we'll have a different kind of Christianity will evolve, which is known as Catholic Christianity, as opposed to Orthodox Christianity. Okay? The main difference being that the Catholic Christianity looks to the Pope of Rome as its supreme leader, whereas Orthodox Christianity does not. Okay, so I'll see you later in the week. Be well. Talk to you soon.